It was a good day. Her mother called to talk about nothing in particular. She was funny. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She told a ridiculous story about a neighbor's dog stealing sandwiches off a picnic table, and they laughed so hard they could barely finish the conversation. Near the end of the call, her mother said quietly, "I'm proud of you, you know." And for a moment, everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. Everything felt like the relationship she had spent her entire life hoping for. After they hung up, she sat with the phone in her lap, and she felt something she had been waiting to feel for almost 30 years. Relief. Real relief. The kind that arrives so suddenly it almost hurts. She looked around her apartment and thought, maybe it's different now. Maybe she's changed. Maybe all the arguments, all the distance, all the years of confusion were finally behind them. Maybe this is who she really is. Maybe this version is the real version. She had thought that before, many times, dozens of times, after dozens of good days exactly like this one, because within a few weeks, sometimes a few days, something would happen. A comment, a criticism, a cold silence, a withdrawal that appeared so suddenly it felt like someone turning off the lights in a room she had just entered. And every time it happened, she would find herself asking the same question. What did I do wrong? Dark psychology has a name for the cycle she had been living inside for most of her life. Trauma bonding, not simply a difficult relationship, not ordinary family conflict. A trauma bond forms when harm and comfort become tangled together, when pain creates longing, and relief creates attachment. The difficult period creates tension, fear, confusion, hope, and then the warmth returns. The phone call, the laughter, the pride, the connection, and suddenly everything feels okay again. The relief feels like healing, but often it is simply part of the cycle, because the warmth does not erase the pain, it follows it, and that sequence is exactly what makes the bond so powerful. The hardest part is that the good moments are real. The laughter was real. The affection was real. The pride was real. That is why people stay, because nobody stays for pain alone. People stay because sometimes they receive exactly what they have always wanted, just often enough to keep hoping. She had learned this lesson very early, long before she had words for it. Love arrived unpredictably. Sometimes it filled the room. Sometimes it vanished without warning. And she learned that the safest thing to do was remain ready for its return. Always ready, always waiting, always hoping. For years she believed she was waiting for her mother to change. But eventually she realized that wasn't true. She wasn't waiting for transformation. She wasn't waiting for perfection. She was waiting for permanence. She was waiting for the warm version to stay. The funny version, the loving version, the version that felt like home. She believed that version was the real one, and every difficult period was merely a temporary interruption, a mistake, a phase, something that would eventually disappear forever. If you have a parent who sometimes feels like everything you ever needed, and then suddenly becomes someone completely different, you probably understand this hope. The hope that the good version is the true version. The hope that one day the coldness will stop returning. The hope that if you can just be patient enough, understanding enough, loving enough, you will finally get to keep the person you only seem to borrow. That hope can organize an entire life. Looking back, she could see the pattern clearly. There would be weeks of warmth. Conversations would feel easy. Visits would feel comfortable. Everything would seem normal. Then something would shift. Sometimes there was an obvious trigger, a disagreement, a boundary, a decision her mother didn't like. Other times there was no trigger at all. The warmth simply disappeared, replaced by criticism, distance, silence, or disappointment. And eventually, the warmth would return again. Not with an apology, not with a conversation, simply as if nothing had happened, as if the previous weeks had never existed. And every time it returned, it felt so good that she almost forgot the coldness completely. The human brain is especially vulnerable to unpredictable rewards. A reward that arrives every time becomes expected. A reward that arrives randomly becomes addictive. The uncertainty is what creates the attachment, the not knowing, the waiting, the hope, the possibility that maybe this time things will stay good. One afternoon, she accidentally discovered just how predictable her unpredictable relationship really was. Months earlier, she had begun writing small letters in the margins of her calendar. G for good, B for bad. She wasn't trying to track anything. She was simply recording how she felt after conversations. One letter at a time, nothing important, or so she thought. Then 6 months later, she looked back, really looked, and suddenly the pattern became impossible to ignore. 2 good weeks, 1 difficult week, 3 good weeks, 2 difficult weeks, then good again. The rhythm repeated over and over, like ocean tides, like weather, like something following rules she had never noticed before. For 20 years, she had experienced every cycle as a surprise. Now she could see it had almost never been surprising at all. She never showed the calendar to her mother. There would have been no point, because the pattern was invisible to the person creating it. Every difficult period felt isolated. Every conflict felt unique. Every withdrawal felt justified by something specific. The larger rhythm simply didn't exist from her mother's perspective. And perhaps that was the saddest realization of all, because the pattern was older than either of them. Her mother had learned the same cycle from her own mother, the same warmth, the same withdrawal, the same hope, the same disappointment, passed from one generation to another without anyone consciously choosing it. Like inheritance, like weather, like a storm moving through different decades wearing different names. And suddenly something shifted inside her, not inside her mother, inside herself. She stopped calling it love when it wasn't love, and she stopped calling it cruelty when it wasn't cruelty. Instead, she called it what it actually was: a pattern, a cycle, a rhythm, something predictable, something that had very little to do with her worth. The coldness was not proof she was unlovable. The warmth was not proof everything was finally fixed. Both were simply parts of the same system. That realization changed everything, because once you recognize weather as weather, you stop blaming yourself for the rain. She still talks to her mother. People are often surprised by that. They expect a dramatic ending, a final confrontation, a slammed door, a permanent goodbye. But that wasn't her story. What ended wasn't the relationship. What ended was the waiting. She stopped waiting for the warm version to become permanent. She stopped treating good days like promises. She stopped treating bad days like verdicts. She simply allowed each day to be what it was. Nothing more, nothing less. The strange thing was that her mother barely changed at all. The cycles continued. The weather still shifted. The difficult periods still arrived. The warm periods still returned. But the experience of living inside the relationship became completely different, because she no longer believed she was responsible for controlling the climate. If you have spent years hoping that one more conversation, one more chance, one more season of patience will finally make the good version stay forever, hear this gently. The good days are real. The love you feel on those days is real. The laughter is real. The connection is real. You are not imagining any of it. But the good days are not a promise. They are not evidence that permanent change is finally around the corner. They are simply good days, and good days are allowed to be enough. You can enjoy sunshine without believing winter has been canceled. You can appreciate warmth without building your entire future around it. You can accept what is beautiful without convincing yourself it will never leave. Maybe that is what healing looked like for her. Not leaving, not fighting, not fixing, simply understanding. Understanding that she could love the good moments without becoming dependent on them. Understanding that she could survive the difficult ones without making them about herself. Understanding that weather changes and that none of it determines her worth. Because the truth was this: some of it really was love. That part was real. But she no longer needed to spend her life waiting for the version of her mother that only visited to become the one who finally stayed.